We could have got Tiana in 1920s flapper style, frog green getup with iconic finger waves, and maybe a little bit of Mom and OD magic if the little figures dancing in the puddle at her feet or any inclination. Instead, we got Snow White and the Seven Dwarfsmen. I'm gonna let y'all sit with that one for a second. Disney released a promo for the Tiana series November 12th, 2021 with the caption reading, #Tiana First Look Concept Art, the new long-form musical series that follows newly crowned Princess of Maldonia on a new adventure, but her New Orleans past isn't far behind. We could have had a musical series. Tiana in Maldonia. Or, I don't even care about Maldonia. Let's start with that. I don't care about Maldonia. I just want to see my girl living, thriving, happy, running her business. And they took that from us. 4 years in radio silence. For me, and for, I'm sure like a lot of people, it felt like, Disney was moving in like the right direction. Only to hear about the cancellation a couple of weeks ago, or a week or two ago, that the series was not going to be happening anymore. And to hear from the princess herself, Anika Nani Rose, and to hear like her heartbreak about it, especially during this time period that we're in with, DEI initiative being, basically erased, Black history being erased and taken out of schools, and just the state of the country at the moment, it just felt like another blow on top of everything else. So with that being said, this video is going to be a little bit different than my usual writing vlog style videos or poetry videos, because I really wanted to come on here and talk about something that is important to me and something that I'm really passionate about outside of just like my writing, and that is representation, specifically Black male representation. But as we know, as much as Disney gives, Disney takes. Just the fact that Disney gave us our first Black Disney princess and then spent 80% of her movie as a frog. Disney will give just enough to make it feel like they're really pushing the envelope, but then not go far enough to really seal the deal. Disney gave us our Black Disney princess, but with a caveat that we won't keep her Black the whole film. And with a caveat that, her prince, well, he's not going to be Black. He's going to be from a fictional place called Maldonia with a fictional language. And we won't actually meet his parents or know anything about his background until maybe the last 0.5 seconds of the film. Is it any surprise that all that hope and excitement that I had in 2021 and leading up to what was supposed to be the release in 2023 that never came, and the writer's strike in 2024 and now 2025, and hearing about the cancellation, that joy did not last. That excitement did not last. We have to backtrack to 2009. An article was released for the New York Times by Richard Barnes, I think is his name. Brooks Barnes, sorry. Titled, "Her Prince Will Come Critics Too." And his whole article is basically referring to the criticism or concerns from fans that have kind of sprung up following the release of the trailer. Not even the full movie. The movie hasn't even come out yet at this point. Just the trailer, and people already have their concerns. Of course, I'm sure you have some people who are kind of pressed with the fact that we're getting a princess who doesn't fit the stereotypical look of what we know Disney princesses, a majority of them, to be leading up to 2009. The other side being, what races Prince Naveen? Despite the fact that the title of his article explicitly refers to a prince, Barnes rarely talks about Prince Naveen in his article. The little mention that he did was to refer to an African American culture site called Black Voices, who wrote about their frustration with the prince being fairly light-skinned, to which Barnes responds with, and I quote, "Disney says that he's not white," end quote. Not only does his statement completely not allow him to further dig into why fans of color may have these concerns or why this would be an issue, to have a lighter skinned prince alongside a very visibly dark skinned black woman. Barnes actively ignores the long track record of black racial caricature that Disney has spanning back to Walt's time. He completely breezes past the history of supporting and uplifting white leads that Disney has shown time and time again. He goes on to say, "Cartoons by their nature trade in caricatures." His dismissive rhetoric shows that by his standards, Disney is the ultimate end-all be-all, despite any hesitancy with which fans of color reacted to the trailer. By the time the actual film comes out, more criticism follows, because people actually get to see in full the extent of the film, the way that 80% of it is spent with the two main leads as frogs. Naveen is not black. The fact that he's not Creole, and that the prince and princess don't share the same ethnic background and historical upbringing, despite, as we've seen with literally every other princess film, not including Pocahontas, where the two leads share a racial and ethnic, a historical similarity between them, and we just didn't get that for Tiana. Jumping forward to 2016, Monique Jones wrote an article discussing black male representation in Disney, where she ponders over Naveen's cultural and racial background. And I want to point out here that, honestly, until I got to college, I never actually questioned Naveen's racial background. I always assumed he was black. Disney never explicitly stated what he was. Nobody in my friend circle or my family ever talked about what he was. So as a little girl watching this film about a black princess and having, lighter skinned people in my family and darker skinned people in my family, and knowing the wide range of shades that black people come in, I really thought Naveen was just black and Creole. And then also, of course, like I said, being from Louisiana, I never questioned this man's race, ever. And I think for a lot of children who are melanated, who are black and brown, I think that these films where we actually see characters that are not white represent wherever we want them to represent for us. He was whoever we wanted him to be. If I thought he was black, he was black. And that was, the end of the story. But that was until the kids of the early 2000s grew up and we started doing a little bit of digging and we started questioning the way that we and the people that look like us show up in media. Naveen is not white or black. Disney Wiki says that he is Indo-European, which is also a debatable one, because point to Madonia on the map for me. It's not, you can't do it. And Maldonian is a fictional language. So it's you can't even really go off the phrases that he says either, like Abinanza and Di Fragi Puto and all these different things. It feels Spanish in origin, but then it can also feel French, Creole, but then it can also, there is no, Disney could say that he's something else tomorrow other than Indo-European, and we would just have to take their word for it, because we don't know it. He is from a fictional place, which leaves Tiana's prince with a made-up background and no easily traceable ethnic history, despite Tiana being from a very real and very culturally rich, mind you, city of New Orleans, Louisiana. It was an odd creative choice made by the Disney producers that kind of blurs the line between fictional and reality, and is a testament to how far Disney will push the racial envelope without getting their hands dirty or their clothes too wet, or in simple terms, pissing a lot of white folks off who pay them, I guess. Jones took to Twitter to ask Black Man one pointed question. How do you feel about Disney/Disney Pixar not having any Black animated princess? With a host of responses from, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really bothered because I never really thought about it, to, I mean, it doesn't surprise me, we're not their target audience, never were. The results were disquieting, but not entirely out of the norm. Jones responded to these tweets with a list of demands for Disney to recognize the story they had on their hands and change the narrative. Well, it's 2025 and Disney hasn't learned. Black boys are clearly not their target audience. Why would they be? It only makes sense that the first Black animated princess film was targeted to Black girls, excluding boys. And let Barnes tell it, Disney has spent the last 20 years making huge strides to depicting race. From 1998 Mulan to the 1997 Rodgers and Hammerstein's Brandy Cinderella, because you gotta add the brandy. I'm sure that Disney fans are grateful that after an entire decade of waiting, we finally got to see a Black animated princess alongside a raceless prince. Now another decade has passed since Princess and the Frog was put on the back burner, and its successors, Tangled, Frozen, have received sequels and short films. I don't even know what half of this even is. Despite whatever strides Disney has made towards diversification in its recent films, can't forget about Bruno, it is not exempt from maintaining an old trope in media that positive Black male representation is rare or almost non-existent, with most Black male characters appearing only as side characters. As much as I do love Tiana, and I appreciate what the story gave us as far as showing us a very raw and authentic, portrayal of a Black woman trying to forge her path forward in the world, I can also critique the film and Disney in the way that there is really no positive Black male representation. And before you get on me, I will acknowledge that her dad is, set up to be this very, positive force in her life. However, they kill the man in the first 5 minutes. And they don't even tell us from what. A man that young, and he just, did he get sick? Was it, racial tensions? What's happening? Was people, pressed because this man was feeding his community? And then instead of giving us a Black prince later on to be Tiana's love interest, y'all give us this man from a fictional island who is a womanizer. In an industry where Black love is absent and single parent households with Black women as the caretakers run rampant, the lack of Black male representation in film hits home for Black boys and girls alike. But if the assumption is that Black boys won't be watching these films and therefore do not need to be catered to, then why have Black male representation at all? Right? Which is heartbreaking when I think about how over the summer of 2021, I spent many days watching the first 30 minutes of Moana on repeat with my then 2-year-old cousin, now 6. The way his arms would spread out as Maui in bird form took flight. The way his stubby fingers would point at the screen and he yelled turtle over and over again as toddler Moana ushers a baby sea turtle back to sea. I wonder if in a decade he'll still sing happily to How Far I'll Go. Or if he'll go stark quiet and gasp in shock when the shiny crab appears. Who said boys, specifically Black boys, don't watch Disney princess films? Or that they shouldn't be taken into consideration when these films are made? Does Disney take young boys into account at all? They must have to, or else we wouldn't have these titular male characters like Hercules and Aladdin. Such masculine portrayal. Aladdin jumping across rooftops and through windows, Hercules being a literal god with unparalleled strength and brawn, and of course the flirting with female identifying characters. These stories couldn't possibly have come about without acknowledging a male audience. This, along with Disney's vivid 2D animation, large musical numbers, and motivational storytelling, are just as appealing to elementary school aged boys as they are girls. Boys who by the age of 4 have surely begun to recognize themselves on the basis of race and gender. Boys who notice when there are no characters on screen that look like them or share their identity. Hence the belief that princess films are not for boys, in the same way that superhero movies aren't for girls. Besides Tiana's father, the only other integral black man in the film is Dr. Facilier, who has no other complexity to him besides the fact that we know him as the evil voodoo man. He's rendered just as two-dimensional as the art style used to bring him to life. We know nothing about his origin, how he came to be, or even what he gains from doing any of this to Tiana and Naveen. Except, of course, the goal of evil. Oh, and that he's a royal on his mother's side, which really is only used as a way to feel close to Naveen and himself uplifted. And yes, I know the theories of him and Mama Odie, but this goes far beyond fan fiction. My 2-year-old cousin is not thinking about the complexities of Moana as the first Polynesian princess. He is not thinking about Maui in terms of race. And if one day I can get him to sit down and watch The Princess and the Frog, he might point to Tiana and call her by my sister's name. In a decade, he might take pride in seeing black characters on screen the way I did. A decade after that, when he's my age now, he may think back over the films he watched as a child and scrounge his brain to think of any that look like him. He may go down a rabbit hole from Maui to Naveen and back again. He may ask friends if Naveen is black and consult Google once he gets differing opinions. He may grow upset by the assumption that he had as a child, now rendered incorrect. Or he may not. But he will take note, and the thought might perplex him. Jones argues that Disney's actions are an extension of the wider American public to deem black men and black masculinity as dangerous. She brings up ways in which victims of oppression, ranging from slavery to the rise of the BLM movement following Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown's deaths, are often depicted through a stereotype of savagery and fear in the mind of the killer. Lack of representation in children's films is only one facet of a greater issue concerning the villainization of black men in mainstream media. It's still an important factor, though. Disney gave the public their first ever black animated princess, while foregoing any positive and long-lasting black male representation in the process. What happens when decades have passed and there are still no black princes?